Testing, 1, 2, 3. Okay, I made I made a mistake when we ended the morning session. I said, please be back in your seats at 2 p.m. And then I got up to leave, and one of our retreaters here at the monastery came up to me and said, Bhante, the afternoon session begins at 1:50, not 2 p.m. I think that's because when I was doing my personal retreat, I would start my afternoon session at 2 p.m., so it got stuck in my mind. So we could take some questions. I said I would give the instructions for the new stage, or the next stage in our practice. But we'll take a few questions, not too many, because we're actually moving on to a new stage of practice. So first I have a written question from one of the retreaters here at the monastery. Okay, so she said, when I do the meditation today of experiencing the whole body, I can only feel half of the body, the right side, and the sense of the left side is still very weak. Yesterday, I could sense both sides of the body almost equally. What could be the reason for this, and what should I do about it? Maybe Gita has some advice on how to make both sides of the body imperceptible. Okay. I actually don't know the reason for this, because I never experienced this myself, but what I would just say is to give more attention to the side which is obscure, which is difficult to experience. Because sensation is always taking place everywhere throughout the body. It's just that a matter of whether we're able to tune into that sensation or not. The nerves, unless there might be cases where the nerves are damaged, for example, somebody has an injury and the nerves are damaged, then they can't feel things maybe with one hand or with one side of the body. But if you were able to feel both sides of the body yesterday, and I don't think you had any serious accident last night or this morning, so the nerves on both sides should be functioning. So I don't know the explanation why this takes place, but what I would say is to give special attention to the side or to a particular organ or appendage, like the arm or the leg on the side which is obscure, and just let the mind rest there. Sometimes like thinking arm, or leg, or even the chest, and just let the mind rest there, looking for the sensations, and in time the sensations should appear. If they don't appear, just then don't get stalled there permanently, but just then go on to the parts of the body that you can sense clearly, then go back to the obscure parts. I could tell you experience I had. This is when I was doing these retreats in the Goenka system, actually under the guidance of Goenka himself back in the year 2000. It was 2001 at their main meditation center in India. And the advice is that you should be able to experience everything in the body, the entire body, right down to the smallest little parts of the body. And two things that I had special difficulty with, and it might sound a little bit funny, the back of the ear was one, the back of the two ears, and the other is the inside of the lower legs. And what I found when the mind became very, very sensitive through repeated practice with the rest of the body, that then I would put my attention on the back of the ear and just attending. And before long, I could feel the back of the ears. And similarly, I would do the same thing with the inside of the lower parts of the legs. Just put the mind there. And of course, first it's obscure, it doesn't become manifest. But when I put the mind there and just keep the mind there for some time, then sensations start to appear. Okay, so just try it in that way. Okay, so let us see, I see a number of hands up. Okay, one is Nina Laboy, and you, let me get this other device. Okay, you could go with the question.
Greetings, Bante, from Seattle. Yesterday at the 7:45 sit, after the initial breathing, then expanding my awareness to the body, which was fine. As I was ready to begin the scan, I got an acute resistance that I was unable to overcome. And even after
what?
a resistance,
A resistance.
to the scanning.
Mm-hmm.
And it was as if my body was resisting the scanning. And do you understand why this might happen?
You know, it can be like what we would call deep sankharas, deep formations that sort of come to the surface. So earlier you were able to do the scanning, all right.
Yes.
But then just at this particular session, there came a resistance to the scanning.
Yes.
Okay, I would say, were you able to do the sweeping okay?
No, I couldn't do that. I could feel all of my body. I
Yeah.
could feel sensations around the body, but when I started the scanning, that's when the resistance came.
Okay.
It almost felt like aversion,
Yeah.
but I understand it could be the
Okay.
sankharas.
Yeah, here I have to sort of guess because I don't have personal experience of this. What I would say is try to do the scan despite the resistance. But if the resistance becomes too strong so that it's really a very strong aversion comes up, then just try to do full body awareness. Just settle into the whole body without scanning through the parts of the body.
I have another question.
Okay.
Subsequently, at the last mindfulness of breathing sit, I was able to calm myself and practice. As I began to scan, I remembered the instructions to know the full breath. So I began to try to do that, and it made it much easier to scan, but a bit harder to notice sensations. But there were times when my complete breath could only cover half of my body. Then I would take a breath to finish in the manner of exhale down and inhale up. Is this a correct?
Wait. I have to use this. Okay, go on.
I'm sorry. And so there were times when my complete breath could only cover half of my body. Then I would take a breath to finish in the manner of exhaling down and inhaling up. Is this a correct way to do this method?
Yeah, okay, I think I understand exactly what you mean. In fact, I find this often to be the case myself. Um, yeah, so often, okay, when going down, okay, with the full breath, a full out breath, pretty much when I'm sweeping down, I only get as far as the waist. Okay, then I pause and I just take an in breath, not trying to move the attention around, just take a mindful in-breath. Then with the next out-breath, push from the waist down the legs to the feet. Yeah, and then similarly when moving upwards, with one breath, one in-breath, you might move from the feet only up to the waist. Then you just take a kind of blank breath, call it, not moving the attention, just take another out breath. And then with the next in-breath, you move from the waist up to the head. That's quite okay.
Thank you. Thank you, Bhante.
Yeah, it could even take, sometimes I find it might even take me 3 breaths to get from the head. It doesn't matter as long as one is moving as sort of quickly as you comfortably can, up and down.
Thank you so much.
Okay, we go with Young.
Bhante,
Young?
I have a question about walking meditation.
Yeah.
When I try noting picking, I tend to note my intention instead of physical sensation. Is it wrong?
Okay. At this point, I'm not introducing noting the intention. Don't pay attention. Don't pay attention to the intention. That will come in time, but now we want to focus just on the actual physical sensation of the involved in the act of walking.
So try to focus on the contact points of the soul.
Okay, the instructions I gave so far, yeah, when picking up the foot, you're aware of, you're attending to the act of picking up the foot, then you're pushing the foot forward, so you observe that as pushing. Then when you put the foot down on the floor, you're observing the 3 phases. We'll call all of these placing. You're placing the heel, placing the sole, placing the ball of the foot. So there's placing, placing, placing. So there's picking, then pushing, and then placing, placing, placing. And you do it in a kind of natural way, not making it too artificial, like, okay, picking, pushing, placing. Yeah, not sort of artificially dividing those stages, but you're noting the stages. So it's sort of more like a fluid, natural movement of picking, pushing, placing, but you're noticing you're doing quite slowly when placing the foot on the floor so that you can detect the 3 phases of placing: heel, sole, and ball of the foot. Okay. Okay, next question is Ophelia.
Yes, Bhante, thank you for all your teaching. My question is, my breath tends to be shallow and short. So when your instructions said that experiencing my whole body sensation in breath, experiencing whole body sensation with out breath, then I find that I don't have enough time to have this process of thoughts. So I wonder, but then I cannot extend my breath in order to put in these thoughts. So because that would be not a natural breath. So I just wonder what should I do?
Maybe I'm not sure that I quite see the problem, so explain it again.
My breath tends to be short and
Yeah.
shallow.
Yeah.
So if I have to put in the thoughts about experiencing the whole body sensation in breath, experiencing the whole body sensation out breath, I find I don't have enough time to do
I
it.
see. Okay, now I see the problem. Yep. Maybe my instructions were a little misleading in that it's not that you have to use a whole verbal formula, but this is just the kind of determination. Verbal formula is just a determination that you make. But if you're having the short breath, you could even use just whole body, just whole body in, whole body out, or just whole body, and don't even bother about in or out. Yeah, but the thing is, the objective is to pick up the whole body, the sense of the whole body while you're breathing in and breathing out. But you don't have to include, I breathe in, I breathe out in the mental formulation.
Okay, thank you, Bhante.
Okay, Samantha.
Can you hear me,
to,
Bhante?
Okay.
Thank you, Bhante, for taking this question, my question. And it's, can you hear me, is it? Yeah, and for the wonderful retreat and the guidance. Basically, my question is just trying to clarify my understanding of the practice. The awareness, so my awareness of all the sensations, is that to train myself to be aware of the body and to be so that I'm in the present moment. Oh, hang on. I think I got my, sorry, Bhante. I think I had my headphones off. Can you hear me?
Yeah, the sound had not been coming through so clearly before.
Yeah, I forgot to put my headphones on. I thought I was on the speaker. Can you hear me now, Bhante?
Okay,
Can you
continue.
hear me? Oh, yeah, yeah. Just want to say, I don't know whether you heard me. Just want to say thank you for a wonderful retreat and the guidance. And I just want to clarify my understanding of the practice. So the being aware of all the body sensations and going through that practice, is that the purpose of that? Is that so that I can train myself to be present in the present moment in everyday to day life, or is it to watch the arising passing of the sensations so that I can understand anicca?
Yeah, okay. The practice is unfolding in stages. So first one wants to get a clearer, a clearer, more finely detailed or perception of the sensations occurring in the body. So you want to get a clearer discernment of the sensations in the body.
Mm-hmm.
And then as one is sort of tuning into the sensations at finer, subtler levels, one starts to see that the sensations are always changing, arising and passing. And so that is leading into the perception of impermanence. And so one wants to move to the perception of impermanence, but you can't lose the discernment of the sensations. Otherwise, you'll get caught in abstract reflections on impermanence. But one wants to be actually perceiving impermanence, impermanence as revealed in the arising and passing of the sensations.
Brilliant. And
Okay.
because this is the Kayanapasana, so is this also another way of sort of like being aware of the whole body through the sensations as Bhante was guiding, so that I can be aware of the body without getting lost in thoughts during the daily activities as well?
Oh, you mean
Is
in
that
everyday
another,
activities?
in everyday activities, so that I'm not sort of
In
daydreaming?
everyday
mindful.
activities, you could, on certain occasions, you can be tuning into sensations, like if taking a walk, you could be following sensations in the feet. When brushing the teeth, you could be mindful of the sensations in brushing. But if engaged in ordinary activities, you can't be tuned too finely to the sensations. Otherwise,
No.
yeah,
Yeah.
you'll be like a weirdo.
Loose. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you, Bhante. Appreciate it.
Okay.
Sadhu.
I think I'll have to take one more question because I want to move into the next phase of the practice. And let's see somebody that I haven't had yet. I think David Chung, I think I haven't had you, or maybe I did, but anyway, okay, you're the next in line. So you ask your question.
Thank you very much, Monty. I'm thoroughly enjoying your meditation retreat, especially last night when you in your talk, since I'm a Chinese born in Burma and having a chance to come to this country. My question is, in your talk about the book, The Heart of Buddhist Meditation, you talk about the understanding of the mind, the transformation of the mind, and the liberation of the mind. And that was very interesting, except I tried to remember what was it involved about the liberation of the mind. Thank you very much again.
Okay. So that wasn't a question then.
The question is about the liberating of the mind. What does that involve?
Well, I think I explained yesterday that it's the liberation of the mind of all of the defilements, the unwholesome roots from greed, hatred, and delusion, or the different groups of defilements. And then that comes about through direct insight into the three marks of existence: impermanence, then dukkha, the unsatisfactory nature of conditioned phenomena, and then anatta, non-self. And I'll be speaking a little bit more about this in the talk today, this afternoon, so maybe we could take in more detail in that talk. Okay, I want to move now into the next phase of our practice. And so now we're coming to the next section in the Satipatthanas, or actually the next section in our course on Satipatthana. So let me do a sharing of the screen. Yeah, we might as well take this sutta, okay. Okay, so far we've been doing one section in contemplation of the body. This is the section on mindfulness of breathing. And as I explained yesterday, when we do experiencing the whole body, we're experiencing the whole body through the sensations, and in a way that also tapers into, I don't need this, okay, that tapers into Vedana Anupassana, the contemplation of feelings. In this case, it's exclusively the bodily feelings, the bodily sensations. Okay, so now we're going to, so we didn't have a deliberate, dedicated section on the contemplation of feeling, but we're moving into contemplation of mind. And then actually I don't agree with this very much, but it's about contemplating. How does one abide contemplating mind in the mind, or mind in regard to the mind? And this is the way the text states it. Here, let's say a practitioner understands, or better than understands, knows. It's not much understanding, but simply knowing a mind that's affected by or influenced by lust, as a mind influenced by lust, a mind not influenced by lust, as a mind not influenced by lust. Similarly with hate, or a mind free from hate, a mind affected by delusion, or a mind not affected by delusion. One knows each of those states of mind as they are. And then it elaborates in still more different states of mind. Yeah, so in another file that I have. Yeah, so there are 16 mental states grouped into 8 pairs, but the ones that we're going to be primarily concerned with are the mind affected by, here the text uses raga, and the translation lust is maybe too narrow and too specific. Let us just say desire or craving. And then hatred, maybe again is too strong. We could just say aversion. And then delusion. And then we have the cramped or narrow mind. And then the scattered or distracted mind. So those are the main ones that we'll be concerned with. And now it's rather interesting is that I haven't been able to find in the suttas, though it speaks about contemplating the mind, a specific technique for observing the mind. What is the method that one uses for observing the mind? And so last year when I was doing my own winter retreat and I wanted to do the contemplation of mind, I came up with maybe my own method for doing the observation of the mind. And this is the way it works. First of all, the underlying premise here, and I think you can validate this for yourself, and it's a rather strange observation, that there seem to be 2 factors of the, 2 sides of the mind, 2 aspects of the mind. One is the mind, which is actually generating the thoughts, emotions, volitions, decisions, reminiscing, daydreaming, and so forth, impulses, desires, and so forth. So the mind that's actually engaged in generating mental activity. So that is one side of the mind. The other side of the mind is the side of the mind which is simply observing and aware of what is taking place in the mind. Perhaps these correspond to the distinction that the canonical texts make between, they speak about the mind and mind consciousness. So this is the mano and mano vijnana. So maybe it is mano, which is generating the thoughts, impulses, judgments, decisions, and so forth. And mano vijnana, that is aware of that. Perhaps, I'm just describing the functions to those terms used in the text. But in any case, if you just reflect on how your mind works, you could see these 2 aspects to the mind. The mind that's generating thoughts, emotions, feelings, and so forth, and the aspect of the mind that is aware of what is taking place in the mind. Okay, so now the method of practice that I developed is to collect all the thoughts and activities of the mind and compress them into one idea, one word, and that is the word mind. And so one brings up into the mind the word mind. Just the way when we do the breathing, sometimes we make the mental note in, out, but here we use the word mind, and that is what is being done by the active side of the mind. Is just the task is to just generate the word mind, and then the observing portion of the mind looks at the active side of the mind that is generating the word mind. So in other words, you are formulating the word in your mind, you're formulating the word mind, and with the other side, the observant portion of the mind, you are watching that word mind. And the task is to keep on watching that word mind, as you are repeating it with your mind over and over, but you're not just repeating it sort of mindlessly like a mantra or automatically but you're you're using the word mind as a cue to be watching the mind. And the task is to watch that word mind as closely, thoroughly, and carefully as you can. Keep on repeating the word mind, mind, and you're watching the word mind being formulated in your mind. And I say, sometimes I use the comparison, it's like a cat. There's a house with a mouse hole, a hole in the wall where the mice come in and out. And there's a cat. The cat likes to catch the mice, so the cat crouches in front of the mouse hole, watching the mouse hole for a mouse to peep its head out. And then the cat, of course, will jump on the mouse and catch the mouse. And so you're watching the word mind as closely and carefully as you can. And what you discover happens is that even though you're trying to watch the word mind like the cat watching the mouse hole, but it's like the cat, his attention might be diverted by another family member comes walking through the room, or some insect crawls across the floor, and the cat's attention gets diverted, and then some of the mice come running in and out, and the cat just doesn't catch them. And so this is how sometimes thoughts will come up into the mind and you haven't been observant enough. And this is where you start developing the ability to find out what is going on with your mind. What kind of thoughts are arising? And then I made up another little file. Let me get that one. Okay, these are the things you might notice as you're watching the mind. When the mind when the observing mind slips away from the word mind, then different mental states arise. And these are the mental states that we classify under the headings used, or the terms used in the Satipatthana Sutta. So we have the mind with lust, and here we have lust or craving in a broad sense. So normally, or usually in English, the word lust signifies sexual desire, but the Pali word raga has a broader sense. So it can be desire for any of the 5 enjoyable sense objects, or desire for the possessions which give sensory enjoyment. Nice. Okay, desire. Well, we have craving for delicious food, in some cases craving for alcoholic drink and drugs, or craving for fame, honor, praise, and wealth, desire for power, especially power over others, attachment to loved ones, to one's spouse, partner, and children, and so forth. Many varieties of desire or craving. And so you have to be watching for those thoughts to come in. Then the next heading that we have is hatred, or maybe more broadly, we could call this aversion. So there would be sometimes raw hatred, persistent hostility, or a kind of ill will, where there can be momentary annoyance or irritation, resentment, which is something more persistent, sometimes envy and jealousy, which are states associated with hatred. There can be bitterness, flashes of anger, even sometimes eruptions of violence, violent thoughts, belligerence, and so forth and so forth. Okay, then there can be the mind with delusion. And so with delusion, some of the modes of the mind with delusion will be cynical doubt or skeptical doubt, wrong views, idle speculation, then conceit, ego pride, vanity, and some of the grosser forms will be ethno-nationalism, racism, religious dogmatism, and so on. It doesn't necessarily mean that we're going to have all of these, but these are just some forms that, of the more extreme forms that actually go with delusion. There are sometimes hybrids, so things like racism can go with delusion combined with hatred. Religious dogmatism can be delusion in combination with craving and so on. Okay, then we have the cramped mind. This is a mind that's tight, tense, rigid, or a mind that becomes dull and heavy, drowsy, unwieldy. And it's related to the hindrance of sloth and torpor. And then the scattered mind, that's the mind that's distracted, the mind with agitation, restlessness, worry, regrets, and so on. Okay, so those are some of the defiled states of mind. And so if any of these states arise, what you do is simply note it, drop it, and go back to bring up again the word mind and go on watching the word mind, watching as closely, as consistently, as continuously as you can. It's the mind is repeating the word mind, 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 but it's not done just automatically, mechanically, but you are watching the mind. You are using the word mind in order to keep watch over your own mind. Okay, so maybe this will do for a starting point. And okay, maybe I'll do some guiding of the first stages in this meditation and then let you practice independently. Maybe since we've been sitting now for 40 minutes, we could do a couple of minutes of bending and stretching. Okay, 2:30, just we'll do 3 minutes of bending and stretching, then we'll do the actual formal practice. Okay, you can take your seat now. And we'll start off with a few minutes of mindfulness of breathing. You do just the simple observation of in and out breathing around the nostrils, no scanning of the body. Okay, now we're going to shift our focus from the in and out breathing to the mind itself. And to keep the mind under observation, what you do is to formulate with your mind the thought or the word mind within your mind. And you keep on mentally repeating that word with the active faculty of the mind, while the passive observing phase of the mind is watching, observing the formulation of the word mind. And you're trying to watch the formulation of the word mind as closely and carefully as possible, trying to catch even the way the word mind takes shape within your mind. Keep on watching, watching, watching. As closely, carefully, precisely as you can. And when anything else arises, any other mental state, any thoughts, images, emotions, fantasies, just note them quickly. You don't have to label them unless they are especially prominent, but just note the mind is thinking or imagining, then drop it and go back to watching the word mind. if any kind of thought becomes particularly strong and persistent, then you can simply label or designate that kind of thought. At the outset, let us just confine ourselves to thoughts of desire in any of its many varieties, or thoughts of aversion, displeasure, anger, ill will, in any of its many varieties. But only if those thoughts become especially persistent or prominent. Otherwise, the little sort of monologue that goes on in our minds, just drop those thoughts as soon as they arise, using the word mind as an antidote, a countermeasure to put a stop to the little internal chatter. And when you focus on the word mind, treat it as something extremely interesting, extremely fascinating. You're trying to find out how a word arises within the mind. Looking for the starting point, the origin of that word in the mind. If you find that the mind is drifting, then you make the mental note drifting, drifting, or wandering, wandering. And then you again formulate in your mind the word mind, 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 and bring the focus of your observation back to the word mind being formulated within your mind. Testing. Okay, you can relax now. And we'll have now another session of the walking meditation. And remember that we do it in the same way as we were doing it this morning. We have 1, 2, 5 phases. Picking up, pushing, then putting down in 3 phases. The heel, the sole, and the front of the foot. So picking, pushing, placing, placing, placing. Okay, so we'll do the walking meditation. We'll do 20 minutes of walking meditation, and then we'll have another period of sitting meditation. Okay, everybody should be back in their seats. Okay, we'll do another session of this contemplation of mind. And again, I'll give a little guidance at the beginning. Okay, so you take your sitting position. And we start with maybe about 4 or 5 minutes of mindfulness of breathing to stabilize the mind. Okay, now we're going to turn our attention to the contemplation of the mind itself. And our objective in this practice is to keep the mind under observation in order to see very clearly and starkly and directly into the workings of our own minds. And so the expedient device that we use to observe the mind is to set up within our mind the word mind as the object of observation, the object on which we focus. And as we are focusing on the word mind, we are keeping the mind itself under observation. And so you bring the word mind into your mind. You bring the word mind into your mind, and you mentally repeat the word, but not in the way of reciting a mantra, but rather you, as you're mentally formulating the word mind, you're watching that word take shape in the mind. And so you're mentally reciting the word over and over, watching the word as it arises from within the mind. It's a little bit like you are sitting maybe on a bench outside of, on the outer rim of a fountain in a park, and you're watching the water sprout out of the fountain, and you're trying to see the exact point where the water emerges from the fountain. And so you're seeking to discern the point where the word mind takes shape in your mind. And as you do so, you'll find that this technique brings many little momentary thought formations bubbling to the surface. And you just dismiss them, drop them, as soon as they arise, coming back again and again to the direct observation of the word mind itself. But sometimes more prominent thought formations and emotions will arise, and the ones we are particularly looking for are thought formations governed by desire, or in other words, craving, or other thought formations governed by aversion, ill will, anger, or resentment. Or else, under the heading of delusion, we could put just the random drifting of the mind without any particular strong overtones of greed or aversion. Okay, so we are looking first to keep the mind directly under observation. But when the mind moves off, stops observing itself, then we can discern thoughts or emotions that might be governed by greed or craving or lust, by aversion, hatred, anger, ill will, or just random drifting. And when that happens, one labels the type of mind, the mind state, then lets it go and comes back to direct observation of the word mind as representing the mind itself. Okay, let's continue in silence. Okay, you can relax now. And now we'll take a little break, a tea break, and we can come for the Dharma talk. We'll give it 5 more minutes, so we come at 4:35. We'll start, that's on Eastern time. So we'll start the talk at 4:35. And again, during the break, try to maintain your mindfulness and clear comprehension. So not in too rigid a way, you could be a little relaxed during the break. Testing 1, 2, 3. Okay. Am I on? Okay. And do you have the recording going? Okay. Okay, so it seems everything is set up. Okay, so let's begin with the salutation to the Buddha. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Okay, so this afternoon we've started to practice the Chittanupassana, the contemplation of mind. And just before I was looking through this famous Buddhist verse collection called the Dhammapada. Anyway, I think everybody knows the Dhammapada. So, okay, you can move back. You don't have to take such close-up of me. Yeah, and it has a chapter called the Chittavagga, that is the chapter on the mind. And I thought that some of the verses here might be quite appropriate to the kind of experiences that we undergo, whether we're doing the meditation subject like mindfulness of breathing, but also I think it becomes especially confirmed when we start to do the contemplation of the mind. So I just read a few verses at random and see how they relate to our experience. Okay, so the flickering, fickle mind is difficult to guard, difficult to control, but the wise person straightens it as the arrowsmith straightens an arrow. And this one I like a fish that is drawn out from a lake and thrown upon land flutters, even so does the mind flutter. So if you're a good Buddhist, you don't go fishing. But in my earlier years as a teenager, I would sometimes go fishing with my friends, and you catch the fish, and then you remove it from the hook and you throw it into a basket, and the fish is still alive, and it jumps around from here and there. It refuses to settle down. And so when we look at the mind, we start trying to do the observation, mind, mind, mind. And we find that the mind doesn't want to remain under observation. It sort of slips away. So you think, at the outset, I should be contemplating the mind, but then what happens? Okay, the mind leaves the post of observation, and then it might be roaming backwards to the past. indulging in memories that might be accurate or distorted. It might be indulging in states of sadness, sorrow, distress, regret, or happy memories, joyful memories, nostalgia, fond memories of the past. Or the mind jumps ahead to the future. This is like the fish jumps this way, back to the past, that way, forward to the future. So it jumps into the future, usually with desire, with hopes, with expectations, with craving for accomplishments or material possessions, status, position in the future, or with fear, worry, anxiety about the future. Or often we just indulge in idle imaginings, idle expectations about the future. And so you think the solution, sometimes it's said, don't dwell on the past, don't project into the future, keep the mind settled in the present. That's all well and good, but sometimes when the mind is dwelling in the present, it gets stuck on the present. It gets stuck by obsessions, by worries, by longing, desire, and often by reminiscing about the past. Well, that's going to the past. Or it gets stuck in the present by way of grumbling and complaining. Yeah. Yeah, I remember my days. This is about grumbling and complaining. This is when I was in graduate school, when I first encountered Buddhism. And I was living in the graduate residence hall. This was at Claremont Graduate University in Claremont, California. And I was associated with a Vietnamese Buddhist monk who was my first Buddhist teacher, and he gave me basic instructions in meditation. And so every evening, I think it might have been from 9 to 10 p.m., or it could be 8 to 9 p.m., I would sit in meditation. And it seemed whenever I would sit in meditation, almost as soon as I cross my legs and settle in, suddenly a dog starts barking. And this went on night after night, and I would be grumbling and complaining in my mind, why doesn't that dog shut up? Can't those people get their dog to shut up? And finally I decided I have to do something about this. So what did I do? So once the dog starts barking, our room was on the third floor of the graduate residence hall. This was Dartmouth Avenue, and the other street was 12th Street. So I come downstairs to the street level. I hear the dog is barking from a house somewhere on a street running down below, running perpendicular to 12th Street. So I go walking down the street, and I look down the street, and as soon as I reach, I go walking down the street, as soon as I reach the corner, the dog stops barking. And I'm wondering, what am I going to do? Should I go to every house on the street and say, by any chance, do you have a dog that was barking? So finally I gave up and realized that I just had to accept the fact that the dog is barking. But I thought, once I get to Asia and take the full ordination, there ain't going to be no dogs barking in Asia. And so this is the 1972, November 1972, when I arrive at the monastery where I'm to take Theravada ordination. We come out to the monastery, and I get set up in a little cottage on the premises of the monastery, and evening sets in, and I'm sitting there thinking, oh, it's so quiet and peaceful, so different from the situation in America where I had that dog barking on the street, down the street. So I thought, blissful meditation. In, out, in, out. Wow, I'm heading into the jhanas. In, out. Woof! What's that? Coming from the hill on the other side, there's a little village. So our side of the hill is the temple, and there's a little valley with rice fields. The other side, there's a hill with a village. So I hear a woof. Okay, one bark, no problem. Then woof, woof, woof. And then it sets off a whole chorus of barking coming through the entire hillside. Was like a symphony orchestra of, there will be oboe dogs, violin dogs, trumpet dogs, trombone dogs, kettle drum dogs. What is the other kind of bass fiddle dogs? Every kind of dog, from the little woof, 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 to the deep, dark woof, 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 all going simultaneously. Okay, so that way I came to see that the problem is not outside with the dogs barking, but the problem is with my own mind creating the obstruction to the dogs barking, the objections to the dog barking. Okay, so anyway, so that's a little bit of a deviation. So we have the mind fluttering, flipping around like the fish thrown onto land. The next verse, the mind is hard to check, swift, flying wherever it wants. Again, let the wise person guard the mind. The guarded mind leads to happiness. And then I think the last two verses are especially important. Okay, verse 10 of the chapter. Whatever harm an enemy may do to an enemy, an ill-directed mind can do us greater harm. Then the next verse, neither one's father, nor your mother, nor any other relative or friend can do greater benefit. A well-directed mind can bring you greater benefit. Okay, so the task is sort of the challenge that we find in the practice of Dhamma is to transform our mind from the state of the ill-directed, was here he translates the ill-directed, or maybe you could say the wrongly directed mind, the mind that's sort of dominated and governed by the kilesas, the defilements, greed, hatred, ignorance, conceit, and so on, and to transform it into the well-directed mind, a mind that's directed towards the goal of enlightenment, the goal of liberation, a mind that's brightened, uplifted, adorned, and ennobled by the pure and beautiful qualities of the mind that are always present as potentials lying dormant within our own mind. Yeah, in fact, we could say that those potential, beautiful qualities are more fundamental to the nature of the mind than the defiling qualities. Even though the Buddhist texts say the defilements are without discoverable beginning, but we could say that the defilements can be eliminated, can be uprooted and eradicated. Whereas the beautiful potential of the mind can never be completely eclipsed and eliminated by the defilements. So we have maybe a story, perhaps it's partly legendary, but a story to illustrate this in the Buddhist text, the story of Angulimala, who was a notorious mass murderer who went around killing his victims, and then it said cutting off one of their fingers, drying off the flesh or cutting off the flesh, and then taking the bone, the finger bone, and weaving them together to form a necklace which he would wear. And so this would be almost the vilest, most degraded type of person one could imagine, the mass killer. But the Buddha, through his great compassion, looking out upon the world, saw Angulimala in his mind's eye, came to him, and using expedient means, he subdued and transformed Angulimala until Angulimala requested admission into the monastic order as a monk, and Angulimala became an arahant, a fully liberated disciple of the Buddha. And so those potentials were always there. The Buddha must have seen them sleeping deep within the mind stream of Angulimala, and he knew how to bring them up to the surface, how to nurture them so that they came to full flowering in that liberated and purified mind. So a mind that had been so encumbered by a taste for violence, for murder, for killing, even perhaps delighting in the fear that he would see in the faces of his victims, cruelty and heartlessness. And yet he was transformed, so he would refer to himself as a hingsaka, the harmless one, the one completely devoted to the practice of non-harming, non-injury. Okay, so how do we transform the mind and liberate the mind? So I've come up with my own list of some of the methods that can be used to transform the mind, to lead it from that state of being wrongly directed, and then bring it to the state of being illuminated, enlightened, and liberated, or at least suffused with beautiful and ennobling qualities. So one that I spoke about yesterday, and which I took from the book by my German teacher, Nyanaponika Mahatera, is simply the power of mindfulness. So when you apply mindfulness to the observation of the mind, we start to see different thought formations appear, and our own habitual tendencies then start to become illuminated, lit up by the light of mindfulness, so that we come to know and to understand our own mind. It's like we're putting a floodlight on the mind so that all of the creatures that are hiding within our mind are now exposed. Yeah, there's something that I see occasionally. If you do a search on YouTube, you could find it. People sometimes set up a nightlight. These are people who are living in wilderness areas. A nightlight and a camera, maybe by a brook on their property, And then with the camera, they take a video of what's going on that. There might be a log across the brook. And when you see the video, you see different creatures crossing the log. You might see a coyote crossing, or a wildcat, or a bobcat, or deer wandering around in the woods at night. And of course, there'll be raccoons, squirrels, other little creatures. And so the nightlight is illuminating what goes on. When we look at the woods at night, we just see a dark woods. We don't know what's going on. But when we shine the nightlight, we could see all of the creatures crossing the brook over the log. And so when we apply mindfulness, we see all, especially through contemplation of the mind, we see all of the little animals or creatures that are wandering through our own mind that normally we don't see because our minds are fully engaged in our activities, our projects, the things that impinge on the senses, that grip our attention. But now we've closed off the 5 physical senses, and we're not even letting ourselves, giving ourselves the luxury to hide from our mind by focusing on the breath or bodily sensations. But now we're looking at the mind itself. And now, even though they try to hide, but they'll come slipping through, even though we are thinking mind, 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 but there'll be little holes in our attention. And then those thought formations, the habits of the mind, will start to appear. And then if we have good mindfulness and discernment, we'll catch them and dismiss them. And in this way, by dismissing them, by letting them go, dropping them, dispelling them, we are weakening their power. Of course, it's not a matter of just doing it on one occasion, not a matter of just a 4-day retreat, but if one does at least regularly, at least occasionally, practice of direct observation of the mind, dispelling, dismissing the unwholesome states whenever they appear, then they'll gradually become weaker and lose their grip on the mind. Of course, we have to realize that this is a gradual process, a matter that requires patience, determination, and commitment to a regular practice. But the power of mindfulness itself, coupled with, of course, mindfulness is not working alone, but it's part of a cluster of mental factors that are working together. And so what I would say are particularly relevant here are 3 factors, and we have this in the Satipatthana Sutta. He dwells contemplating the mind in the mind, ardent, clearly comprehending, and mindful. Atapi sampajano satima. So those are the 3 factors involved here. So we have satima, possessed of mindfulness. That is, mindfulness is, you could say, the light of awareness, the light that illuminates the content of the mind. But then one needs sampajanya, clear comprehension, or maybe better in this context, clearly knowing. That is the ability to identify what is going on in the mind. This is where sometimes labeling comes in useful, applying a designation to the state of mind. Because if you just have mindfulness, you could be aware, but you're not really pinpointing what the state of mind is. And so you're not clearly identifying it, and so you don't really know what to do with it. And so I was saying in the instructions I gave earlier, so we're just sort of pretty much at this point confining ourselves to states of mind accompanied by greed or desire or craving, states that involve some aversion, ill will, or irritation, or the dull drifting of the mind. But when we start labeling those states, identifying them, and then we bring, so that's the second factor, clear comprehension, clearly knowing the state of mind. Then the third factor involved here is indicated in Pali by the word atapi, which is often translated ardent, though ardent, maybe it suggests a passionate lover, but the word atapi is a designation for the factor of energy or effort. So this is the right effort that what applies to dispelling that unwholesome state. So over and over again, whenever the unwholesome thoughts arise, or even thoughts that are not, let's say, not dreadfully unwholesome, but just the semi-conscious, beneath the surface, idle chattering of the mind, commenting on everything one is experiencing, forming little judgments, a kind of a monologue that goes on. When we notice that the mind is just drifting with random thoughts connected together by no discernible logic, again we dispel the drifting and collect the mind through the use of that word or that focal point, mind, mind. And in this way we keep on bringing up more and more layer beneath layer of the contents of the mind, illuminating them with the light of mindfulness, discerning them and identifying them with clear knowing, and then dispelling the unwholesome factors or the dull, monotonous, distracting factors. So that way we transform the mind through the power of mindfulness. Another tool for transforming the mind, and this is, we're not using this in this meditation retreat, or at least generally not, and that is the application of the appropriate antidotes. So there are texts where the Buddha says, where he'll mention several of the unwholesome states of mind, and then he'll mention the corresponding antidote, the remedy for each. And usually these are put, I think that there's a set of 4. So he says, for sensual lust, and this is particularly relevant to the monastics, the antidote is the contemplation of the unattractive nature of the body. That is, observing or contemplating the body by way of its constituent tissues, organs, and fluids, and so on. And so when one penetrates beneath the skin and looks into the actual composition of the body that we take to be beautiful and attractive, we see that there's just a bundle of muscles, cartilage, bones, various organs, kidneys, heart, liver, lungs, intestines, stomach, and so on, bodily fluids, bile, phlegm, pus, blood, and so on. And in this way, as we apply this method, the force of sensual desire, particularly sexual desire, loses its grip on the mind. So that's one remedy, the remedy for sensual lust. Then for ill will, the opposite, ill will, anger, resentment, particularly directed towards people, the remedy is the meditation of loving kindness, metta bhavana. And even when dogs are barking, the appropriate remedy in that case also. Gee, I should have thought of that back. Maybe I should go back in time to 1972 because I hadn't learned the meditation of loving kindness well enough at that point. Then it could direct the loving kindness to the dogs, and then the barking will no longer be disturbing. So loving kindness for removing ill will or anger. Then restlessness of mind or distracted mind. The remedy, the Buddha says, is mindfulness of breathing. And then there's the conceit I am. This is the conceit that revolves around the idea of a truly existing I. And the remedy for that, the Buddha says, is the anatta sanya, the idea of non-self. Okay, so these are ways that we transform the mind by applying the appropriate remedy. And we should apply the remedy not only when those thoughts arise, but if you see you have a particular tendency, a habitual tendency in the mind, then you can make it a regular practice to use one or another of these meditation subjects. For example, if you have a tendency towards ill will and anger, then devote some time every day to the loving kindness meditation. And it's even helpful, though it's a bit difficult, to do the systematic contemplation of non-self. In fact, I'm going to bring this up again on the next Saturday morning class. We'll devote that again to the perception of non-self. Okay, so that is the second method of transforming the mind. So we have the power of mindfulness, then the application of the appropriate remedy, the antidote. The third method of transforming the mind is the power of reflection. And maybe the corresponding Pali expression here would be yoniso manasikara. This is sometimes translated as wise attention, methodical attention, methodical reflection. So one of the ways one could do this is by bringing to mind, say, if one sees one has certain unwholesome desires and unwholesome tendencies, one can reflect, what are the consequences of acting upon those tendencies, those desires? Okay, so, okay, let me suppose I'm a young monk, 22, 23 years old, and I'm going on my alms round, and then out of one of the houses, a nice, beautiful young girl comes out. Don't forget, I'm 22, 23 years old, so she, let's say 17, 18 years old, comes out to offer some alms. I look up and it's like, wow, what beautiful young girl. Okay, then sensual desire arises. Okay, maybe I go back. Okay, so back to my room. I see the Buddha taught, okay, he says, you do the meditation on the unattractive nature of the body. Okay, so I start doing that, but it ain't working. I start off hair of the, so in the traditional list we have hair of the head. That's supposed to be unattractive, but I'm thinking, wow, she had such nice flowing hair, maybe braided in a certain way or in a ponytail, very nice. Okay, then you're supposed to think of the teeth, supposed to be unattractive. But when she flashed that smile at me, and I saw those white teeth, wow, so nice. And then skin is supposed to be unattractive, but I'm thinking of the skin. But she had such smooth, shiny skin. And again, so many beautiful features. So this isn't working. And so let's say we do the power of, now we bring in yoniso manasikara using the power of reflection. So my impulse is sort of a little troublemaker in the mind says, okay, next time you go on alms round, instead of just accepting the food and walking on, or just instead of just saying Sukhi Hotu, may you be happy, you could make a nice impression on her by chanting a longer verse of blessing. Then she'll really be happy. Okay, so now I'm reflecting now. Okay, if I do that, I'm imagining she'll say thank you, and maybe she'll start questioning me. Okay, are you new to this monastery? How long have you been here? And then I answer her, and then we start a little conversation. And then she says, would you like to come in for a cup of tea? And then I say, okay, thank you, I'd be happy. So I'm reflecting, this might happen. And then before long, we start getting close and closer and closer. And then the thought comes, I want to give up my monk's life and go back to the secular life and become a partner to that beautiful young girl. Okay, so if we use reflection in this way, then we think, okay, what are the drawbacks or dangers in sort of closely associating in this case? So one of the consequences is that it leads to temptation, and then since I cherish my monastic life, I give up my monk's life, then maybe as so often happens, we marry, and then we have some children, and then I'm working a job, and then we get into marital quarrels, and then there's arguments, or just a routine married life. And so I think that's not what I want. I really want to follow the way of the Buddha. And so I'm using reflection, the power of reflection. So that's on one side. The other side, we think about, we have now anger and resentment comes up. And so I reflect. Now I feel anger towards a certain person. So I want to express, or hatred towards that person. I want to express that hatred. And so I think, what is the consequence if I give vent to that hatred in some kind of nasty speech? It creates enmity between us. And we're living together, maybe in the same monastery. So I have to live together with him, and now I've created enmity between us. And then if that enmity grows stronger, then he has resentment against me. He'll create trouble for me. And then that enmity builds up so that living in the monastery or outside, living in the same house becomes intolerable. And then if the hatred becomes strong enough, I'll engage in harsh speech or divisive speech, or angry speech, or even physical violence, which creates unwholesome karma, which can lead to misery in this life and even to a fall into lower realms of existence. So in this way, through the power of reflection, reflecting on the harmful consequences of unwholesome action, whether desire, on the side of desire, or on the side of ill will and hatred, helps to transform the mind, to pull it away from the unwholesome. Okay, the fourth step, means of transforming the mind, I call now we're moving towards the positive side. I call this the power of aspiration. Now one is not reflecting on the dangers and drawbacks in the unwholesome states, but one is thinking of the beautiful qualities towards which one aspires. One may bring to mind such qualities as loving kindness, compassion, generosity, patience, truthfulness, equanimity, generosity of spirit, And so one brings to mind those qualities and one forms the aspiration towards those qualities. May I become an embodiment of loving kindness. May I become an embodiment of compassion. May I achieve purification of the mind, so I'll have a bright and luminous mind. May I become a living expression of wisdom. May I develop that mind of equanimity that remains poised and balanced, whether I'm praised or blamed, whether I receive fame or ill reputation. So one forms these aspirations and one lifts up the mind or the heart towards those ideals. And then the fifth means of transforming the mind, I call the power of determination. And this follows from both the power of reflection and the power of aspiration. And so in this case, one finds certain unwholesome qualities that one wants to overcome, or certain good qualities that one wants to embody, to fulfill, to perfect. And regularly, as part of your practice, you make the determination to achieve or to develop those qualities. So what I usually suggest for people at the outset is to choose 3 qualities. You might look within yourself and find certain faults that you have, and then you look at the opposite qualities, which are the virtues, and you make the determination to overcome those faults and achieve those virtues. For example, let's say somebody who is maybe a tendency to be a bit on the selfish side, very concerned to just maintain their own belongings, not happy about sharing with others. The person gets angry easily, irritated easily, and is easily swayed by, he gets upset when criticized by others and really gets lifted to the skies when praised by others. So those are the 3 dominant faults in this person: miserliness, impatience, and what do we call this? Mental imbalance. And so now the person, maybe through their practice of mindfulness, comes to see those faults within themselves. And so they're going to try to transform the mind through the power of determination. They have the aspiration to be generous, to be patient, and to have a mind of equanimity. But just through aspiration, they can't reach that at once. So it's a gradual process of cultivation, and the way to move towards that goal is through a daily determination. And so the person might, as part of their practice, and this is a kind of meditation. The meditation isn't just sitting in, out, or sensations, 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 but this is also a kind of meditation. May I be generous, ready to give to others according to my ability, with a happy and joyful mind. The second determination, may I be patient and forgiving towards everyone, even towards those who criticize me and harm me. Third, may I have a mind of equanimity, a mind that can remain balanced in the face of praise and blame, gain and loss. And so one starts off in this way, making that determination, and over time, don't look back after 1 week. Am I more generous, more patient, greater equanimity? Don't look back after a couple of weeks, but look back 1 year later and get feedback from other people. You don't have to ask them for feedback, but other people will tell you that you've really changed. How have you done it? You could keep it a secret, or you could tell them the power of determination. Okay, so these are 5 ways of transforming the mind. The power of mindfulness, mindfulness joined with clear knowing and energy. Second, the application of the appropriate remedy or antidote. Third, the power of reflection, reflecting on the drawback in unwholesome states of mind. Fourth, the power of aspiration, generating an aspiration towards the beautiful and wholesome qualities of mind and qualities of character. And fifth, the power of determination, making regular determinations to transform one's unwholesome states and generate and fulfill the corresponding wholesome states. And so we start with little baby steps, and gradually we become stronger and stronger, firmer and firmer, until we find ourselves amongst the ranks of the noble ones. Okay, so thank you for your attention, and we could take 5:22. We'll take a little 8-minute break, and so 5:30 Eastern time, then we'll start our chanting. Now make it just a 5-minute break, that's enough. Okay, so 5:27 we'll start the chanting. Okay, so we can start the chanting, and the person, this is Rocky, you could put up the chanting text. Yeah, you could increase the size a bit. Okay. Oops. Okay. And then, okay, so we start, we'll do 3 salutations to the Buddha. Okay. 1, 2, 3, 3. Yeah, maybe actually the text could be a bit smaller. Okay. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Iti piso bhagava arahang samma sambuddho vijacharana sampanno sugato lokavidu anuttaro bodhisattva sarati satta deva manusanang buddho bhagavati namo tassa samma sambuddhassa ye cha buddha atita cha ye cha buddha anagata pachupanna cha ye buddha aham vandami sabada nati me saranam manyang buddho me saranang varang etena sachavajena hotu me jaya mangalang uttamangena vandehang padapang suvaruttamang buddheyo kalito doso buddho kamatutang mamang Buddhang yavanibana pariyantang saranang gacchami. And then we do a bow to the Buddha. Okay, then homage to the Dhamma. Swakato bhagavata dhammo sanditiko akaliko ehipasiko opanayako pachatang vetitabo vinyuhiti. Yeah. Namo tassa Niyanika sadhamasa ye cha dhamma atita cha ye cha dhamma anagata pachupanna cha ye dhamma ahang vandami sabada nati me saranam manyang Dhammo me saranang varang etena sachavajena hotu me jaya mangalang uttamangena vandehang dhamman jati vidang varang Dhammeyo kalito doso. Dhammo kamatu tang mamang. Dhammang yavani vanapariyantang. Saranam gacchami. And then we do a bow to the Dhamma. Supatipanno bhagavato savaka sangho. Ujupatipanno bhagavato savaka sangho. Nyayapatipanno bhagavato savaka sangho. Samichipatipanno bhagavato savaka sangho. Yadidang chatari purisa yugani atta purisa pugala esa bhagavato savaka sangho. Ahuneyo pahuneyo dakineyo anjali karaniyo anuttaram punyaketam lokasati. Namo tassa atta areya pugala mahasangasa. Ye cha sangha atita cha. Ye cha sangha anagata. Pachupanna cha ye sangha. Aham vandami sabada. Nati me saranam manyang. Sangho me saranang varang. Etena satchavajena hotu me jayamangalang. Uttamangena vandehang sanghan jatuviduttamang. Sangheyo kalito doso sangho kamatu tang mamang. Sangang yavani vanapariyantang saranang gacchami. And then a bow to the Sangha. And homage to the three symbols. Vandami chetiyang sabang sabatane supatiti tang saririkadatu mahabodhing buddharupang sakalang sada. About Imaya Dhammanu Dhamma Patipatiya Buddhang Pujemi. Imaya Dhammanu Dhamma Patipatiya Dhammang Pujemi. Imaya Dhammanu Dhamma Patipatiya Sanghang Pujemi. Okay, so now we're going to do the Metta Sutta, the hymn of loving kindness. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato sammasambuddhassa. Karaniyamatta kusalena yang tang santang padang abhisamecha. Sako jucha sujucha. Suvacho cha samudu anatimani santu sakocha subarocha apakicho cha salahukavuti santindriyo cha nipakocha apagabbo kulesu anugito na cha kudang samachare kinchi Yena vinyu pare upavadeyung sukino va kemino hantu sabbe sata bhavantu sukitata ye ke chipana bhuttati tasava tavarava anavasesa digava ye mahantava majjhima rasakalukatula Dita yeva adita ye chadure vasanti avidure bhuta vasambhave siva sabbe sata bhavantu sukhitata naparo parang niko beta Nati manyeta gatachinang kanchi Pyaro sanapatika sanya Nanya manya sadukamicheya Mataya taniyam putang Ayusa ekaputang anurake Evam pisa babutesu Manasang bhavaye aparimanang metancha sabalokasmin Manasang bhavaye aparimanang Udang adochatiryancha asambadang avedang asapatang titang charang nisinova sayanuvayavatasavigatamito etang sating aditeya brahmametang viharang idamahu diting cha anupagama silava dasanena sampanno kame suvaneya gedang nahi jatu gabaseyang punareti etena sachavajena sotite hotu sabada etena sachavajena sabarogo vinasatu etena sachavajena hotu te jayamangalang Sabityo vivajantu sabarogo vinasatu mate bhavatu antarayo sukhi digayuko bhavatu sabba mangalang rakantu sabba devata sabba buddhanubhavena Sada soti bhavantu te, bhavatu sabba mangalang, rakantu sabba devata, sabba dhammanubhavena, sada soti bhavantu te, bhavatu sabba mangalang, rakantu sabba devata, sabba sanganubhavena, Sada soti bhavantu te. Then sharing the merits. Akasa jabumata deva naga mahitika punyantang anumoditva chirang rakantu sasanang. Akasata jabumata Deva naga mahitika punyantang anumoditva chirang rakantu desanang akasata chabumata deva naga mahitika punyantang anumoditva Chirang rakantumang parang. And scroll to the next page. Imina punyakamena mame bala samagamo satang samagamo hotu yava nibbana patiya idang me punyakamang asavakayavahang hotu sabaduka pamuchatu ti. And we go sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. And we could stand, and we'll do 3 half bows before the break. Okay, so now we'll have a break until, okay, now I'm sure I have it right, till 7 p.m. Then at 7, when we come back, we'll take some questions about this Chitanupasana, the contemplation of the mind method, and then we'll go back into our practice. Okay, so again, as I often remind you, during the break period, try to maintain to the best of your ability the mindfulness and clear comprehension through all the activities.
Thank you,
Thank you, Bante.
Thank you, Bante.
Thank you, Bante.
Thank you,
Thank you,
Bante.
Sadhu, sadhu.
You were 7, Bante. Thank you.
Om
Namo
Stuti.
Buddhaya.
Thank you,
Om
Bhante.
Stuti.
Namo Buddhaya, Bante.
Tung Saranai.
You 7